Hello friends, welcome to our Flutter course. Today we have a very important topic, form and post requests. We'll cover how to send data from an app to a server. In the previous video, we added a future builder to our Flutter app. In this video, we'll implement the ability to create users, and we'll also work on the UI design. Let's get started. The logic for adding users will work as follows. When the user clicks the add icon from the app bar, a dialog will open. This dialog will contain input fields for entering data like name, email, and age. The dialog will have two buttons, Cancel and Submit. When the user clicks Submit, we'll perform data validation, which we'll cover today. If the data is valid, we'll make a post request. Let's start with the dialog. We'll create it in a separate file. We'll create a stateless widget and call it User Creation Dialog. It will return an alert dialog. This alert dialog will have a title where we'll pass a text widget. Next, we'll use the content parameter, which takes a widget. Inside it, we'll have input fields for all the required data. In the past, we would have used just a text field, but now we need something more advanced because we require validation. Therefore, we'll use a form. Form in Flutter is a special widget used for grouping multiple input fields and managing their state. It makes it easy to validate all input fields at once, store entered values, and handle them. The main goal of form is to simplify data input. It allows validation using validators and prevents form submission if the data is incorrect. The form has a child parameter, where we'll pass a widget. We'll pass a column widget, and inside it will be our input fields. However, instead of using just text field, we'll use TextFormField since we need validation. We'll use the decoration field and pass an input decoration object, including a label text so that the user knows what they should enter. Now, let's talk about validation. To implement validation, for example, in an input field, we need to use the validator parameter. It takes a function with one parameter of type string. The logic of this function is as follows. Inside, we check this parameter. If it meets our requirements, we return null, meaning no error. If it doesn't, we return a string describing the error. Here's what it looks like. First, we'll check if our value is null or empty using the isEmpty property of string. In that case, we'll return an error message that will be displayed near the input field. Otherwise, we return null. We also need to pass a controller, as we did when discussing text field. The controller allows us to access the value of the input field. Let's create the controller and pass it as a parameter. That's how we created the first text field for the name. Now, let's do the same for the email. Remember, each field needs its own controller. Next, we'll create a controller for the age field. One thing to keep in mind, this field should accept only numbers. To do that, we can configure the keyboard to display only numbers. We'll use the keyboard type parameter, which takes a text input type. This class has several static parameters, such as text, number, phone, etc. In our case, we'll pass number since we need only digits. Next, we need to adjust the validator's logic for this field. The first check remains the same, ensuring the value is not null and not empty. After that, we need to verify if the value is a number. Even though we've restricted the keyboard to show only numbers, the user can still enter letters, for example, with an external keyboard in an emulator. We'll convert our string into an int. We can't use the as keyword for explicit typecasting here. Instead, we'll create a nullable int variable and use the static tryparse method. This method tries to return an int from the string. If the conversion fails, for example, if the string contains letters, it returns null. We'll check if this value is null, or if it's less than or equal to 0, which can't be an age, and return the appropriate error message. In all other cases, we'll return null, indicating no errors. Now, let's add buttons to our dialog. We can use the actions parameter for that. The first action will be a text button, simply to close the dialog. In the onPressed method, we'll call navigator.pop to close the dialog programmatically. The second action will be an elevated button, used to submit the data to the server. In the onPressed method, we'll check all input fields, and if they pass validation, we'll submit the data. For this, we need to use a global key for our form so that we can call its methods. We'll create a global key of type formState. Don't worry too much about the details for now. We'll have a separate lesson on keys. In short, this key allows access to methods like validate. To link it with our form, we'll pass it via the key parameter. In the onPressed method, we can now use this key. It has a nullable current state field, which is of type formState. This class allows us to manage the state of the form. We can safely use the non-null assertion, because we're sure the key has been passed to the form. We're interested in the validate method of this state. It returns a Boolean, true if no errors occurred, meaning all text form fields returned null in their validator. If any field returns an error, the validate method will return false and display the errors next to the respective fields. For now, we'll leave this validation check empty. We'll call showDialog as we've done before and return our dialog. Let's run our code. Click the Add button in the app bar and our dialog opens. But as you can see, it takes up too much unnecessary space. This happens because we're using a column. However, we can make the column use only the space it needs. To do this, we need to use the main axis size parameter of our column. It takes an enum with several options, and in this case, we are interested in the min value. Now, after restarting the code, we can see that our dialog takes up exactly as much space as it needs. Enter a value in the first field, skip the second field, and enter letters in the third field. Now, click Submit. As we can see, validation worked and errors appeared where needed. However, they only display after clicking the button. We can make this validation automatic using the Auto-Validate Mode parameter in our form. This parameter takes an Auto-Validate Mode enum, and we're interested in on-user interaction. Let's rerun the code and see what changed. Click the Submit button right away. You'll see that all fields show an error immediately. Now that we've enabled Auto-Validate Mode, we only need to start typing, and after each keystroke, validation is triggered. Because of this, the error disappears as soon as we enter a valid value. Conversely, if we enter letters in the age field, an error appears immediately. Now, let's implement the functionality so that when we click the button and the data is valid, a user is created. I suggest using an anonymous function as a callback. A callback is a function passed as an argument to another function, called later when an event occurs or an operation finishes. We'll create a variable of type function with one parameter, userModel. This function will be passed as a parameter in the constructor. When the data is entered and validated, we'll create a user instance based on that data using the constructor, passing values from the controllers. For the age field, we need to pass an int. The text field from the controller is a string, so we can use the static parse method of int. Before, we used try_parse. The difference is that parse always returns an int, non-nullable. However, if the conversion fails, it throws an exception. Therefore, try_parse is safer. Since the value has passed validation, we're confident it can be converted to int without issues. So, we can use the regular parse method instead of try_parse. Once the user instance is created, we'll call our callback function. We can do this either by simply using parentheses or using the call method. After calling the function, we'll close the dialog. Let's pass the function as a parameter when creating the widget in Show Dialog. This function will be called whenever the user enters data, clicks Submit, and the data passes validation. The function will receive the user model parameter built from the input data. Since we have a repository, we can call its method to submit the data and pass the user parameter. Let's add await and declare the anonymous function as async, which is done similarly to regular functions after the parameters. Let's test our code. Enter some data and click Submit. For now, there's no indicator and the UI doesn't change, so let's restart the app. As we can see, we now have one item, whereas there were 0 before. Let's try again. Restart the app. As you can see, there are now 2 items, meaning everything works. So today we covered what form is and how to use it in an app. We used the post method. In the next video, we will continue working on this application and display item from the server in a list view. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next lesson.